of the Secretariat of the together with me is my colleague, Mr. Axel Gruber, who is the Chief Operations Officer of the CFC and who is responsible for most of the project operations of the Common Fund. I would like to make a quick technical note that firstly, if the broadcast is interrupted for whatever reasons, do not panic. We have been there before, we have tried it all before. Just reconnect the same way as you connected originally. It is a lot easier to respond to questions which are entered in the chat box. We are monitoring the chat box and we are monitoring the virtual meeting room. So please do not hesitate to type your questions as we speak. We will see it and we will try to answer best we can. Also, in the interest of maintaining good atmosphere for the meeting, please keep your microphone muted unless you are going to speak. This way we will keep the noise level down in the virtual meeting room so everybody can hear and understand everybody else. So I think we have been long enough on virtual reality, on meetings in cyberspace, so this should be quite familiar to most of you. But do ask if you have a question. Also, we can see you on the cameras for those of you who have the video on. So if you want to say something, just wave your hand or use the function in the software, raise a virtual hand to request for the floor. We will see you and we can quickly let you ask your questions. So with that, I'm going to proceed to a few words about the Common Fund for Commodities. Where just the basics. Common Fund is a relatively small international organization, but we're trying to keep a big profile and reach out to all our 101 member countries. We are an international financial institution. The fund is headquartered in Amsterdam only. We do not have any field offices. We do not have any other locations for the organization. All 28 people working for the Secretariat of the Common Fund for Commodities are in Amsterdam. Common Fund has been set up since 1989, so we have just celebrated 30 years of the existence of the operations of the organization. We currently have 101 countries all around the globe. We also currently have a number of international institutions which are institutional members of the organization. So they take part in the governance, they take part in the meetings of the management bodies of the Common Fund for Commodities if they want to. So for example, African Union may come to our governing council. International organizations can participate in the discussions, but they do not contribute to the capital of the organization and they do not have the voting rights in the organization. Common Fund has 30 years of experience in the commodities sector. So we have a lot of experience. We do understand a lot about the commodity sector in its dimension that matters to developing countries, in the dimension that concerns the commodities which are important for the participation of the developing countries in the global trade. Over the years, the Common Fund has financed over 370 projects with the total value, that's the total value of those projects, in excess of 700 million. This is still small by international standards, but we believe in the Common Fund that we focus our intervention where they matter the most. One question that we might want to consider is why commodities? Why is the Common Fund needed at all? Why has it been set up? It is the only unique international organization that targets commodity sector innovation in the value chain in the interest of global equitable development. Commodity dependence is the root of poverty by some estimates over 2 billion people worldwide who depend on commodities and for whom the commodities are at the same time a lifeline and a symbol of their difficult conditions. They have to rely on commodities because this is what they have. By addressing innovation in global commodity value chains, the idea is to bring them into the fold of sustainable development. Now that we're facing the pandemic, of course, the subject of green recovery from the pandemic and the subject of nutrition security, digitalization as our distant communication becomes more and more important, gender lens, gender equity and equality, inclusive development, and most importantly, sustainable development for everyone as the world is emerging from the pandemic are the focus areas for the CFC. And we would very much like to see project ideas in this field. We'll look for innovation, we'll look for creativity. Common Fund has always prided itself on a multi-stakeholder collaboration. We work with hundreds of organizations worldwide in different projects, in different sectors, in different segments. The focus is always to get the best, the way to use the limited resources of the CFC to address poverty in all of its dimensions. I made a separate slide concerning the vision and mission of the CFC, and it's titled Additionality, Partnership and Innovation. So we are not trying to duplicate what other people are doing. We're trying to supplement them. We're trying to be additional. We're trying to act in our specialty niche where the Common Fund is most effective and where the Common Fund can do things that nobody else can. As I said, we work in partnership, and we believe that doing more of the same is not really the answer, but we're looking for any kind of innovation in the commodity value chain that would allow all the participants, all the stakeholders of the commodity value chain to gain a fair result, to gain a fair living out of the work they do, out of the commodities that they produce. So I think of the generalities. We welcome any feedback, any proposals, any ideas from you on the subjects of things that the Common Fund would need to do, where the Common Fund would need to innovate. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us either today or by email afterwards. With that, I'm going to proceed to more of internal details of the Common Fund. I'll make a small pause as well. So if you have any questions already, then do not hesitate to ask. This is an interactive session, so everybody in principle is equal, and you can always take the floor if you need to.
Andre, there was a question on if this webinar is recorded.
I believe it is being recorded. I'm just checking. Yes, it is recorded.
Okay.
And thank you for this question as well. Right. So I'm going to proceed to the basic slide. What happens in the call for proposals? Firstly, the only way to submit a proposal to the CFC is through the open call for proposals. So by decision of the executive board since quite a few years ago, we only receive project proposals through the open call and only in this same standard format for everyone. that the executive board of the Common Fund have specified at certain points. When the project comes to the CFC, we can assure you that every project gets read by one of the project managers of the CFC. This is part of internal screening by the CFC Secretariat. So every project will get read and will be evaluated against some standard criteria regarding the qualification of the project to be considered further. If the project is deemed eligible, it will be further reviewed by the Chief Operations Officer, by Mr. Axel Gruber, and it will be discussed in the internal project appraisal committee. So all the projects which qualify for support will get a hearing in the group of people, in the group of specialists inside the Secretariat, to decide if those projects need to be seen by the CFC Consultative Committee. The Consultative Committee is a group of 9 independent experts appointed by the member countries on a 2-year basis to advise the Common Fund on all aspects relating to projects. So the Consultative Committee is the body of specialists with a wide range of experiences that will assess if the project needs to be recommended for financing by the Common Fund. The Consultative Committee meets twice per year. In one of the future slides, you will see when the next meeting takes place. And on the results of the Consultative Committee, we would normally come to the proponents of selected projects, asking them for additional information, asking them to explain certain things that the Consultative Committee may have raised. They almost always do. And if all the questions, all the recommendations have been addressed, the project may be submitted to the Executive Board for approval. In between, we will prepare some documents to check with the project proponents, and the project going to the Executive Board will be a project that is ready to get started with implementation soon after approval by the Executive Board. The decision by the Executive Board will be communicated shortly after the meeting. During the whole process of project consideration, the Secretariat may reach out to the proponents, to ask to explain certain things, to ask to provide supplementary documentation. There is a detailed list of documents that needs to be submitted with the proposal. That's part of the call. Please submit or please ask your counterparties to submit as complete documentation as possible so that we can give a fair consideration to the projects that we see. For example, one of the criteria is the clarity of the proposal. If we cannot understand what the proposal is about, it will also be difficult for the Consultative Committee and for the Executive Board to make a decision on the qualification of this proposal for CFC financing. So if in doubt, you can always write to the general address of the Secretariat, opencall@commonfund.org, and we always reply. We keep track of all those messages. We always reply to those messages in substance. I already started on the selection criteria. The normal question is, what are the minimum criteria for the proposal to be accepted by the CFC? The first rule of thumb is to check carefully the CFC objectives, as they're stated in the open call. The Executive Board may adjust those objectives once in a while, but in general, the focus is effective use of CFC resources in commodity value chains to address the poverty of the primary commodity producers, to assist poor developing countries to make the most of their available commodity base. We'll look at the track record of the applicant, whether the management team, whether the people proposing the project can demonstrate the experience of doing it, of doing things that are similar. We typically ask for a 3-year track record. Sometimes experienced people, but they form a new company or new organization where we look at the experience of people in the proposal. The companies come and go, but the people are the ones driving it forward. The quality of the application in terms of completeness project design, I already mentioned that it doesn't need to be long and extensive, but it needs to be clear in explaining what the project will do, how the project will innovate, how the project will make a difference for the stakeholders of the commodity value chain. Financial information, financial projections can be completed in spreadsheets that are downloadable from the CFC website. This is standard financial information, and Axel will later today explain those things to you. Finally, we would very much appreciate if all the proposals submitted could indicate what assumptions are significant, what significant assumptions are used in designing the project proposal. For example, we assume that the market for cashew nuts will be growing at 5% per year for the next 10 years. All those assumptions essential for understanding of the operational model of the project and of its financial projections, leading to the viability, leading to the sustainability of the project. All those assumptions need to be clearly indicated. This will make the understanding of the project a lot easier. There's a lot more words in the application form for the call for proposals. And there is a fairly extensive document with instructions for completing the call. Do have a look. Do have a look in those documents, and by all means circulate those documents as far as possible to the people who could use those documents to submit their proposals to us. Again, this is the open call, so it is open pretty much to every organization, to every cooperative, NGO, any company in our member countries. If they have an idea of what can be done in the commodity sector in pursuit of the goals of the Common Fund for Commodities of the member countries of the CFC. So this is as far as the process is concerned. I'm going to show you the calendar for this call for proposals. So we're currently receiving applications. The deadline is 15 April. So whatever applications we receive before or on 15th of April will be included in this call for proposals and will receive an answer, as it says at the bottom, in October 2021. First, from April into approximately middle of May this year, all the proposals will be read. We typically get over 100 project proposals, sometimes 200 project proposals from all around the world for 6 project managers to read. So somebody will read your project proposal. By end of May, all projects will have been screened and decided for submission to the Consultative Committee. We must submit documents to the Consultative Committee a month before the meeting. So in the end of May, we will have to send out the documents for the projects which need to be considered by the Consultative Committee. In preparing those documents, we may already reach out to project proponents. And again, we very much appreciate being able to communicate effectively and to clarify as much as possible any issues that the Consultative Committee might find necessary to consider the documents. The Consultative Committee will be held from 28th on June until 1st July 2021. So 9 experts normally, under normal circumstances, they would meet in person in the CFC office and sit together for 4 or 5 days to go through all the projects in front of them. Currently, it's already second or third meeting of the Consultative Committee that happens in cyberspace. Well, then we will be in cyberspace, but in the same way that all 9 experts are in this virtual meeting room, and they take turns expressing their opinion about each of the projects submitted. So it is a lot of work for them. In the end, a report is produced, and pieces of the report relating to individual projects with all the recommendations and all the requirements, they will be sent to the proponents. After the Consultative Committee, as it says, from 2nd July until approximately 6th September, this is the time to address any recommendations by the Consultative Committee. So again, we will be reaching out to the proponents. We will be asking questions, we will be communicating, and in the end, we must prepare documents for the Executive Board to consider financing for the project. Executive Board meets on 7th October, and on the 7th October, the decision will be made whether the CFC will make a commitment to the project. So this is the time when the proponents will be advised that their proposal was recommended for financing or not recommended for financing. Now, in the case of Executive Board approval, the real work is just beginning, because then we will have to meet all the conditions specified by the Executive Board. Typically, there are some conditions for each project seeking financing. We will need to conclude the legal documentation between the Common Fund for Commodities and the organization proposing the projects. And that includes the non-binding term sheet first, desktop due diligence. We will check on all the facts mentioned in the project. This will be followed by on-site due diligence. Either one of the secretariat or a consultant, an independent consultant recruited by the secretariat, will visit the project site and will try to verify again all the relevant information for the viability of the project. We will draft a contract, and we will discuss it, and we will sign it, and then the CFC can use the funds. We do expect that projects start within 12 months after approval. The sooner, the better. We understand that some questions may require additional work by the proponents. We appreciate the effort made, and we hope that this can be concluded fast without much delay. We do have a sunset provision that if the project proponents, for whatever reason, are not responding, not making progress towards operationalization of the project, then after 24 months, if there's no further progress with the opening of the project, then the Common Fund has the right to cancel its commitment to the project. We use this right on case-by-case basis, and only when there's genuine lack of interest from the project proponents to respond fairly to all the questions asked. So this concludes the generalities of the process of considerations, what happens to project proposals as they come to us. The next section, the longest part of this webinar, will be regarding the details of the application form. So again, I will pause for a moment in case there are any questions to be asked. Okay, I see no hands. I see no requests for the floor, so I will just roll forward. Part one, the general information about the proposal. That's the part of the application form, and that's pretty straightforward. We need to know who is applying. We need to get the assurances that the person is actually authorized to sign on behalf of the organization that they represent. We request people to certify that all the information is in good faith and all the information is accurate to the best of the knowledge of the people supplying the information. The key information about the project proposal, location. We need to see that it's in a member country of the CFC. We need to see the development relevance of the project to the needs of the member country of the CFC. This includes the information about the target market. For example, a project targets organic coffee market in Europe, or project targets fortified flour supply in East Africa, something like that. We need to be clear about the markets that will be addressed in the projects. Basic financial viability indicators. We need to know if a loan is requested, or if some kind of participation is requested. Axel will talk more about it. Trade finance may be requested. Total project cost, that's the total cost of the operation, and the CFC contribution as part of it. So how much money will actually be from the CFC to support the whole operation. It is advisable to give us the internal rates of return of the project as an indication, as evidence of the project viability, of project sustainability in financial terms, and also the assumptions that underlie these internal rates of return. Information about the relevant experience, I already mentioned it, that we like to see the evidence that people proposing the project know what they're doing in the particular field, in the particular market, and possibly the list of competition. Who else in the same market? Who else occupies the same market niche? Who is the competition? A small piece about the documents to be submitted with the project proposal. So the application form, 20 pages. Financial projections, please use the Excel tables, fill them out. Background information about the proponents, financial results for the past few years of the company behind the project or organization behind the project. Evidence that the company pays its taxes on time, that it's duly registered as a company or organization in its country, in its jurisdiction. Relevant partner relations, for example, if a company or a cooperative have other development partners, then we would like to know who they are, and we would like to see the evidence of their relation. And if there's any risk mitigation facilities behind the proposal, for example, a government guarantee, this will also be included here. So this is the package of documents. This is the basic information. And the next part is a request for financing, where we will tell you about the financial instruments that are available from the CFC. So I wonder if my colleague Axel Gruber would want to take this financial part. That's the second part of the application form.
Yeah, there is a question about funding and costs. I will come to that in my presentation. So. Okay, can you go on, Andre? Okay, yeah, the form of financing in the CFC offers, we try to increase the amounts over the years. There is, and then the normal term loans, which is the major part of the intervention of the CFC, are from 300,000, which is pretty much at the lower end, to 1.5 million. In single cases, we've gone beyond that, but it was pretty project specific. Up to 7 years, a maximum of 2 years grace, which doesn't mean 9 years, it means 7 years with a 2 years grace. We look for some kind of security pledges. There may be a mortgage. We have not used very often, as mortgages are most of the time very difficult to be registered in single countries. And in many countries, it's quite costly to register a mortgage. So we are trying to accommodate on this side to having a lean kind of financing. Nevertheless, we cannot completely shy away from collateral, because it has been one of our less favorable experiences. If there are securities there and we don't take them, they are taken away by others. So it is in the interest of the CFC to be at least aligned with other lenders as far as the securities are concerned. We don't want to arbitrage out others, but we don't want to be treated as the third in the row among potential lenders into a company. The interest rate moves is between 5 and 10%. Which is low for which sounds high for some countries, but the 10% it would relate to the funding rate of the country plus a markup. And why is that the case? We are funded by governments, so the CFC could not provide loans below the rate a single government would fund itself. So we need to respect the fact that countries have a certain funding rate, which is represented by government bonds being issued in the different currencies. And then there is a markup for the special project risk. The CFC needs to respect that we are not unlimitedly funded. So we need to make sure that there is a reasonable compensation for the risk we are taking, because any risk that is not that hits us in our portfolio would reduce the funding basis of the CFC. And in the interest of the entire community, we have to be pretty careful not to be in favor of a single counterpart assessing the risk low and facing losses in single engagements. This is term loan, and this may be a loan that refers to CapEx, capital expenditure, increase of equipment, buying new equipment, growth. But there is as well a trade finance facility which has evolved as a typical way to start with a counterpart, because besides the fact that it gives very quick support to a counterpart that wants to increase its operations by exporting more, it offers us the opportunity to grow with a counterpart step by step, to get insights into the operation and to get insights into how this operation works, besides all the financial analysis which we have to do at the start. And most of the time, as we are development impact funds, so this kind of trade finance very often offers opportunities to directly support smallholder farmers in the country, because the trade finance is pretty closely related to interventions that by off-takers, by processors, that directly relate to funding that is going into the hands of the farmers. So it's a kind of a pre-financing of working capital that is very often used to fund operations that export. Equity stakes would be a possibility. We've done some, but for the time being, we are restricted. We've used all these funding for the equity stakes, and which we did in form of interventions into other funds. We are doing as well development impact bonds, a minor number of interventions, but a very interesting instrument. I don't want to elaborate too much on this, but this is an instrument where the obligations of payment by a number of counterparts is depending on the impacts delivered. And there is a fast track financing facility which we have used in more cases for the emergency liquidity facility, which we built up last year to support companies in a difficult phase of the COVID crisis, to make sure that liquidity and financial support can come pretty quickly. The advantage of the fast track financing is that the approval procedure is a little bit leaner than the approval procedure in the term loans, and as such, it may be implemented faster. But it's not a facility that is let me use that word, grandish, so to speak, that has less of financial analysis. It needs to be made pretty clear what's the user fund for this, and it's not something where we don't look very closely to the financial. For us, it's a costly intervention because it's very small as an intervention, and it requires the same kind of analysis. And you may all know, in the development world, people are looking at amounts, not only number of projects implemented, but as well as amounts implemented. And as such, this always requires then some kind of explanation. Why is the amount so small as the number of projects is so high? But it is possible if you have, and in certain cases, it makes a lot of sense if it's about a certain equipment or something like that. But user funds should be in all the different cases, but especially here, because we still receive some of these fast tracks which are not pretty clear in the business case. People may assume it's smaller amounts, so they don't need to be that clear as with a full application. It's not the case, just the opposite. We are even looking more closely, but because the experience is in many cases we've received proposals that were not pretty clear. So that's the with all these features, I have to make some explanation based on our experience, and I think this is the function of this webinar, to make you aware of the pitfalls that are in the application. Next page, Andre. Yeah, I already mentioned this liquidity facility. This was based on the fast track, and we could provide it in a number of cases to support projects in difficult times. You may all have faced the experience that in the high season of the COVID crisis, the commercial banking sector was not very receptive to proposals, and we've received a lot of complaints on that issue. So we could help. But it referred to projects that were previously recommended, because we needed to support fast, and we could not go through the whole project evaluation procedure. So it was based on projects that were already recommended and approved by the executive board. So it was an add-on financing at that time. Next. Yeah, that's pretty important. That comes a little bit out of the history of CFC, but as a rule, we still have to stick to that we cannot fund more than 50%, which means in the case of a company, a project, or a cooperative, there needs to be other funding. There's definitely always equity, and there are shareholder loans once in a while, and the participation of the CFC should not exceed 50% of the overall funding to that company. In many cases, we are not the only lender to this company. So as such, this rule is easily fulfilled. But if we were the only lender or the first lender, as this company is in a growth stage where there was equity only, or where majorly equity was contributed, we have to look at the internal financing of the company as well. Yeah, the normal term, and this is, we could go up to 7 years, but it has evolved over time. We are in the tenor of 3 to 5 years. The interest rate, as I said, I may say the 5 to 10, as mentioned before, has turned out to be at a level of 7.3. So you could say, oh, this is just the middle of it, the median and the average of the two. But it has evolved based on the portfolio development and on the very specific interventions in very different countries. So the variation between single investments is indeed spreads between 5 and 10. Yeah, equity, as I said, we are restricted for the time being to funds, and this has been exhausted so far, but there will be opportunities further down the road. The CFC is looking to expand its range of potential interventions, but I don't want to elaborate too much on the future here. Yeah. The minority stake is another rule. Even if this was the case, we could never take the majority of a company. This was a rule the board has given to us. So we are seen as an organization that should not rule a company. This was the assumption. Nevertheless, if there was equity, I think, and I think this is one, but this is a very personal opinion, this is one of the experiences we see through the funds we are investing into. If times are getting difficult, these companies may need their shareholders as positive support in the board, because especially in difficult situations of an operation going forward, this experience is very often desperately needed, besides the access to additional funding through the equity holders. As such, and I may stop then here with equity, as such, we are looking in our analysis as well when we analyze a company, where's the equity coming from right now, and to what extent are the equity providers of this company, are they able to increase equity over time? We know it is one of the most critical areas to have enough equity for an operation going forward. Yeah, but if it's not there, it will be difficult to grow at the rate some of the proposals are submitting to us. So equity definitely is one of the growth restrictions in the development of a company. But this is a given. Yeah, we cannot change this. Next. Is there a next slide, Andre?
There may be a delay on the network.
Okay. No. Okay, yeah, here we are. Yeah, this is again, this is a description in more detail. Most of it has been said already, but this refers to the this is a copy of the application form where you would have to mention what you are requesting the CFC to fund, and here this is what you may have to fill in. Otherwise, we have difficulties to understand what your application is heading for. But this is more or less self-explanatory. Next.
It's coming. It's coming.
Yes. Definitely, I may say before it's coming, the loan period definitely requires then a planning, the filling in of a planning document that refers to the loan period. So if you're asking for 7 years, even if we know beyond 4 to 5 years, any plan is pretty arbitrary. So it is at the end of the day just an exercise to be consistent. Definitely, these templates ask for consistency in the planning process of the operation we are asked for funding, and that's the way it is. Yeah. On the equity side, there is divestment strategies, but frankly, there is this is as well pretty arbitrary. looking at most of the markets we are thinking about. So if there was equity, and that's one of the hindrances of a CFC, there needs to be somebody to either step in if the CFC is doing this, or an exit of selling the company, or even, I don't want to speak about IPOs in that case, but it may come over the years. I think markets are getting more and more professional, and we can even imagine agricultural companies having an IPO. But this is, so far we have not seen that. But we have seen strong growth in some companies that would at least prepare the ground for such. I may say as well at this time, I'm not sure if it comes in one of the next pages. As an explanation to all of this, providing planning sheets and so on, the CFC will not extend financing for pure startups. So all these documents provide a certain, and Andre was referring to that already, we need a certain horizon of operation to lean on. It is 3 years normally. If it is less, we have to have clear evidence that the concept somebody has built up has already a bulletproof, so to speak. There is an operation going on. Yeah, we are not funding concepts. We cannot. We are not able to, and we need a certain kind of operation. And what that means is we do not very often discuss, this is not about the profitability of the organization, but it is about revenue generation. And I say it in very blunt words, and having a control over revenues and costs. And this is not so much the profitability argument, which always comes. No, that's not the point. But because some of the companies are still in a growth stage where the overhead of costs is still not fully compensated by a reasonable amount of revenues. So as just, this is not startup, this is a company in an early growth stage. This does not exclude funding by the CFC, but not having control over the costs, or having exceeding costs in some areas and not being able to explain this would be a negative element in the assessment, and we need to address this. Yeah, next one, Andre.
It's a few words about fast track, Axel, before we proceed to project description.
Yeah, so I've already mentioned these fast tracks. They have a fast, and they are called fast track because there is the possibility of funding this in a shorter period, as we do not need to go through the EB decision process. This is something that can be approved by the managing director, and it will be reported to the next board meeting. But it requires the positive recommendation of the Consultative Committee. So to that extent, a reasonably full financial analysis. And same principle, 50%. So we would not be able to fully fund a company with this one only. I think there is opportunities in this area which would be extension of the operation of machinery and something like that, which does not always require such big amounts. On the working capital side, would be a relatively small operation if you come up with such an amount only, to be seen. Yeah. Next.
Okay, so on the project description, before we proceed to this, so there's a couple of questions in the chat box.
Yeah, let me have a look. I see two.
Any specific requirements regarding the current rentability of the organization submitting the proposal? And I will start by saying that the organization needs to be sustainable. That is, demonstrate its capacity to continue operating on a sustained basis.
Yeah, and I may add, we have our assessment is double bind. So if we look to an operation or a project, we look at the financial side, but we look as well as to the impact of this project or of this operation. I mentioned smallholder farmers already. Yeah, we want to see that the operation is contributing to income generation and to social standards in the area. That there is no action detrimental to the environment, and that there is a reasonable number of smallholders being addressed by the operation. If it is a processing company only, which normally involves smallholder farmers and involves on top of that job generation. Yes, these are the typical situations where funding of the CFC would be provided. And we are looking at these impact indicators equally as we look to the financial side, but we are fully aware if the company doesn't show signs to be financially sustainable, it will be hard to justify that the impact is delivered. Yeah, so and financial sustainability in the definition we need to follow is to show reasonable capability to repay the loan over the time when the loan is being provided. Andre, you may have you.
So I will continue here. And
Good.
the second question is the typical cost of funding, and I will leave it to Axel to answer when we get to the section regarding the financial viability of the project.
Yeah, but I mentioned that already, between 5 and 10, based on the funding rate of the company, and the average rate in our portfolio of all interventions right now is 7.3, which is by hazard the one that's almost directly in the middle between 5 and 10. Yeah.
Okay, so the third part, so the description of the project proposal, it's about explaining to us and to explaining to the common funds, to the governing bodies, what is it that the project is going to do. So operational model, what does the company do now? What does the company intend to do? Or what I say company, but it can be any institution. It can be a cooperative, it can be an NGO, it can be a government branch doing something important in commodities. And what is the transition plan, how to get from where we are now to the intended operation with the help of the CFC financing. Then the operational capacity is something that we already mentioned a few times. Management skills, demonstrated management skills of the organization, and demonstrate financial management skills of the organization. That is simply put, the evidence that the company knows how to count the money, so that there is accounting kept. It can be on cash basis. We have seen co-ops in Africa where it's all kept basically in safe and on paper records and in the simplest form, but it is still organized, it is still under control. The explanation of market system innovation. So is company or is the project doing something new in a new area, or the same thing, something new in the same area, or something known in the new area, or using a successful model from a different branch, a new commodity value chain, any kind of innovation, doing things in a new way counts. Competitive challenges, we already mentioned it, and a brief diagram of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to the project. And that is the internal strong points and weak points, and external strong points and weak points. So what is threatening the project from the outside, and what is threatening the project from the inside. The next section of the application form, it's increasing in significance because there is rising attention to impact investing, and in fact to making more out of the project than just the money. And this has to be counted, and this has to be reported and explained. So we use the SDG framework of the United Nations. We look at the basic indicators of the difference that the project is going to make to the people for whom this is important. Sustainability again comes in. The explanation of the poverty profile of the target beneficiaries of the project. So we want to be clear who are the poor and underprivileged people who will benefit from the operations of the project. There's a separate block on environmental impact of the project. So in principle, projects may be environment neutral. Projects cannot be detrimental to the environment. Any environmental benefits, they count in favor of the project as additional points to elevate the project in terms of priorities. Key impact indicators and any monitoring arrangements. Now, this is made more precise in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the fund has actually 5 core Sustainable Development Goals. So the goal number 1, poverty eradication. The goal number 2, end hunger. The goal number 8, decent economic opportunities for everyone. Goal number 10, sustain income growth for the poorest. And goal number 5, gender equality. So these core Sustainable Development Goals we expect to be reflected concisely in the project proposal in terms of what does the proposal do to advance the world towards those goals. So goal number 5, I already mentioned, and goal number 13, climate action, comes up in more than one project. It comes up regularly, and it is also becoming increasingly significant in bringing the attention of our governing bodies to certain project proposals. We do appreciate that commodity issues are relevant to all SDGs, but we have to focus. Also, it is in the interest of project proponents. So you do not have to bend over backwards, trying to think how the project reflects on all SDGs. We only need the information about the core. And if the project produces other benefits that are relevant to other Sustainable Development Goals, for example, effective water use, then this certainly needs to be reflected, and this will help project get the attention.
May I comment, Andre?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, and with the project proposal, there is a sheet which we would expect you to fill in, and this is your estimation. We want your estimation, and we want it as fair and as appropriate as possible. Yeah. Okay, Andre, then it comes anyhow. So yeah, I leave to you. Yeah.
So indeed, there's a page with impact indicators. We use IRIS framework, and we use it as guidance, mainly to make sure that the indicators are comparable between projects, that we get a complete picture, and the picture that is indicative of the differences between the projects and the different impact they made.
And we would not make an extensive baseline study. So we are basing this on your qualified assessment. There may be a verification study once in a while once the project is approved. So it is even better to be realistic in that respect. We know that our industry is sometimes requiring a lot, and people may see, oh, if I put in here higher numbers, it may seem that the project looks better. We have seen so many, and we immediately see when it is beyond regular boundaries. So the more realistic, the better.
So indeed, even IRIS indicators, maybe some of you are familiar with this, that this is a set of thousands and thousands of indicators. So we are simply asking you to complete those that are relevant, those indicators that you can readily identify from the available information which characterize the projects. And there's some examples. You see, for example, for zero hunger, average agricultural yield and how the project will improve the yield. Total number of hectares cultivated, is it going to increase? Total volumes produced, are they going to be increasing for domestic or international consumption, and so on and so forth. So we are trying to make it as accessible as possible to the people who are going to do the projects. We're not going to impose unreasonable bureaucratic formal requirements on the project, because that will prevent the projects that we want in the portfolio from coming to us. If in doubt, please always don't hesitate to come back to us with the questions regarding any particular indicators. We have somebody in the office who occupies himself entirely with making sure that we get accurate, but at the same time, not so difficult reporting for the proponents of the projects. One further example, one other page is net economic impact. So while it may look a bit daunting, it is in fact quite straightforward, that we simply ask to identify the particular stakeholder group that benefits from the project and to estimate the change to the income that will be produced as the result of the project. I emphasize the word estimate. So we look at reasonable assumptions that underline the estimates. It doesn't have to be too complicated. And again, as Axel has mentioned, we're not looking for full-fledged baseline studies, because they are typically beyond the reach of our normal project proponents. So next block is concerning the sustainability of the projects. The thing that I want to underline here is that it's sustainable from the point of view of stakeholders. So it is sustainable not for the Common Fund for Commodities, but it needs to be sustainable for people involved in the projects. I don't want to give a negative example that people will turn their back on the project after the project is finished, because this is not what we would like to see. We would like to see people engaged and interested to continue the project after the involvement of the CFC has completed. And I think the last block, no, one before last block, the poverty profile of the end beneficiary. Again, emphasizing that we do not look for a full-fledged baseline study, but we look at the best use of available information. The national statistics, maybe the information from census of the local area where the project is going to be implemented. The GDP per capita, maybe the indication that the jobs projects will pay more than the average wage in the country. Maybe will pay in multiples of the average wage of the country. That's a good indicator of impact on the poorest. Of course, the involvement of youth is one of the important indicators that is fairly easy to estimate as well, and the wages paid to the young people entering the commodity value chains. And this is the last slide on this section, and that concerns environmental and social impacts. As I already mentioned, most projects are expected to be environment neutral. Clear evidence of positive environmental impact is most appreciated. We increasingly prioritize this part. We also ask to identify environmental risks, if any, and mitigation steps, if any, available. The fund will generally disqualify projects which pose environmental risks without mitigation strategy for those. Any other positive environmental impacts can be indicated in relevant IRIS metrics. And importantly, a recent innovation that when the project gets approved, the CFC will use the social and environmental risk management system, which we developed in collaboration with the International Labour Organization, that asks fairly simple questions, but important questions about, for example, the working conditions of the people employed on the project. Again, about their wages, about any normal environmental risks that may be created in the project. So this is there will be a questionnaire that the project will have to complete if it gets financing from the CFC. So this is the part on sustainability of the projects. And the next section concerns the financial viability of the project that I will again ask Axel to introduce. If there are any questions, again, please don't hesitate to wave your hand or type in the chat box. Thank you. I see no questions so far, so Axel, you may want to.
Yeah, just push it forward.
Yeah,
it's easier to have it with the slide.
Is there?
No, it's now financial viability. Yeah, some of it I mentioned already. There is a summary of the financial structure. There is a sheet that asks for the balance sheet and the P&L project and loss statement. You do not need to provide a cash flow statement. We would be able to derive that from it, but a profit and loss statement would not be enough because we need to see the balance sheet structure going forward. And we need to see the financial stability of the company. I mentioned the past financial track record. We would like to see an audited financial statement. Can be audited by local audit firms. Sometimes the experience was not so convincing in that respect, but we would accept it, looking then at the consistency of the information provided. We have the capabilities. We screened around 1,000 projects in the last couple of years, so we understand what's going on in a typical balance sheet as to the different balance sheet positions, and we look for financial projections in line with the request for the duration of the loan. So if it is going to be a shorter duration, it's going to be a shorter time period, but we would be looking for the expenditure to be financed, and we would be looking for the use of funds here. Is it so capital expenditure? Is it machinery? Is it real estate in some cases, or is it working capital finance that goes to funding farmers, that goes to funding operational costs, and so that we can get an idea about this, how all this funding transforms into operations and finally arrives in the revenues of the P&L, and hopefully not for a long time arrives as receivables on the balance sheet. Yeah, but is indeed paid. The balance sheet allows us to understand the whole business case if we ask a few questions, and if we have a 3-year horizon, I think we can get a fairly good picture of the operation undergoing. Yeah, and the proposal would be delivered with an Excel spreadsheet on this, so that we can directly go forward with it and coming to the conclusions.
A couple of words, Axel, on the financial ratios that we control for the project.
Yeah, what are we looking at if it's about financial ratios? We are looking at the equity ratio, so we know that equity usually is the cushion for an operation to protect an operation against any kind of risks that appear. So if equity is too low, the company is not and the overall operation is not shielded against risks that appear, and operation comes under pressure pretty easily. So there needs to be a reasonable equity, and there needs to be, as I said at the very beginning, if the equity holders, is it a local entrepreneur is it a family? Is it a mixture of it? Do they have access to international equity funding through some funds or whatsoever? So if equity is low, is not a disaster, but there should be access to additional equity in one or the other form. So that's why the equity ratio is relevant. Leverage ratio, yes, to what extent? And this is what we see very often. And we cannot help out if an operation doesn't have access to equity. They tend, and some are really trying to go forward, tend to be over-debted already, and the operation doesn't go forward, and it comes to needing additional loans to fund the working capital, where the company is already largely over-debted and would need to be restructured, and equity would need to be reinstored. This is things we are looking at, because if the interest coverage ratio is then one we view at this, that means to what extent is the operating income able to cover for interest costs? Is a very common ratio in finance, and it actually says, can this company with an average income it is producing out of an operating margin? We see business where the operating margin, so the very operating kind of the business, costs of the production as against the revenues generated by the production, is already very thin. And if such operations needs to deliver extensive interest costs, it's rather recommended through us. Let's look for equity providers here. Even a fund could be that. We've already supported in some cases, but our access to equity is limited as well. And it is not the CFC doesn't want to do that. I rather feel in a very uncomfortable position when we assess things like that. We would do wrong burdening an operation that has already difficulties to pay its current interest with another loan. It's not reasonable to do that. It's just exposing this operation to even more difficulties. There may be an intermediary way of shrinking, and we've seen operations like this. We've seen operations that have been overexposed, doing too much, not focusing enough, and they were reducing their kind of operation to the areas which offer the best operating margins. We see such cases as well. I may say here, without going too deeply into details, we see cases where the operational case described is a little bit of anything. Pretty much, yeah, agriculture is opportunistic sometimes. Sometimes you need to do certain things because they offer a solution. Sometimes you need to plant out soy to prevent the soil. That's pretty understandable. But we see cases where too many activities are done at the same time. And I'm very regretful that other funding organizations even think that this is good, doing too much at the same time. We cannot see it that way. Business is pretty simple. If you do too many things at the same time, you are unable to concentrate, and as such, a lower growth may very often help. And we've seen, as I said, these operations who reduced their operation and have come to better grounds again. And if there was somebody providing them additional loans, they would have exposed a financial burden to this company, which definitely would be unbearable over time. That's the reason why we are looking at this ratio, not to cut out anything, but to support those who can go better with our support and who would not be burdened with something else, with additional financial charges which come, yeah, somehow. And if we have a loan, we have to follow up. So it's not that, yeah, if we extend a loan, if we disburse a loan, we have to follow up, we have to ask for reporting, we have to ask for how are things going, and it's not coming for nothing, yeah, on the operational side. So it comes definitely with a repayment request, but it comes with a number of reporting requests as well, and yeah, and sometimes the operation is not able to digest this. Okay, I think that's a little bit the story behind the ratios, because I'm in my time as a COO, I've very often been confronted with the argument, oh, you look only at profitable. No, we don't look at profitable. We look at those who can keep revenues and costs under control, and we look at those where our funding is really contributing to the better of this operation, financially and on the impact side. And that's the reason for all these things, going into details, asking a lot of questions, and trying to understand the operational case and the financial consequences of the operational case as it is maintained. That's it from my side.
Right, so we're basically at the end of the presentation explaining the application form. The only remaining part is part number 4, and that's simply the information to help us understand who is behind the projects. So the company name, how long it has been in existence, where, who is the contact person, is the person reachable, not reachable. Surprisingly, we have quite a number of cases where we cannot reach the proponents. So clearly the contact details indicated on the form were not correct. And then if we don't hear back, if the person or persons disappear and are unreachable, then we have no choice. We cannot take this project proposal forward. So one more thing to ask is, how did you find about the call for proposals? Because we constantly try to rationalize our channels for outreach to our member countries. And then it's now the time for questions and answers. And please do not hesitate to make your suggestions on where we need to look to find more of those innovative project proposals that effectively make a difference in our member countries. Thank you. And
Andre, I may add one thing. There was this question on which operations are eligible to present a proposal. And we forgot one thing there. Definitely registered corporations. The case of cooperatives, we have not seen a fundamental objection to this, but we have seen in a number of foundations and NGOs that they cannot be legally obliged to repay a loan. This is definitely necessary. A company needs, or an operation, and if it's a foundation or something like that, they need to be legally obligeable to repay a loan. If this is not the case, we cannot extend a loan. And that depends on the nature of the operation, this is different in different countries. Yeah, so that is I have to give that back to a certain extent. So the operation you are representing needs to be able to sign a legally obliging document which obliges them to repay. Yeah.
Yes, so that is the end of the monologue or of the story.
Yes.
And we would very much like to hear now from you. And just as a technical slide, you can you can just ask questions or you can type them in the chat box. Okay, so I see the first question in the chat box. Actually, first 2 questions already. So, may I know about if the rate is 5% to 9% in the obliger country or the borrower country? So, Axel, would you care to elaborate on how we assess the rate.
Yeah, it is in the country of the obliger. Yeah, so and the obliger in most cases is identical with the borrower. We have some cases where it is a somewhat larger group that has a company in different countries. And if there is a guarantee, for example, we have project of that kind. If there is a company in Kenya extending its operation to Tanzania, we have a case like this. And the Tanzania operation is very small, and so the company in Kenya asks for the loan and is the obliger of it. They may forward the loan to Tanzania, but our obliger, our end obliger, is the one in Kenya. So we would use Kenya as the representative country. In other cases, there may be a project in another African country, and there is a guarantee coming from, let me just say, any organization in Europe that guarantees the loan in favor of this company. Then we would definitely look at the higher credit quality. So if there is a guarantee, by a company in Europe, we would look at this part of it. To be decided in detail, but in general, we take it in favor of the proponent. We don't want to push up rates, or we don't want to push up the complications here. If there is a good argument to have somebody to have a guarantee, we do encourage that, because it can reduce rates. Yeah.
Okay, one thing that I would like to mention here is that government guarantee would help a lot. So a project that has a government guarantee can enjoy access to a particular pool of CFC financing that is, well, I wouldn't say easier to access, because a government guarantee is difficult to obtain, but at the same time, having a government guarantee puts a project into a league of its own, and the CFC looks very favorably at these projects. There's a question in the chat box, does a CFC member country need to sponsor a company or an NGO applying for financing? And we expect the projects to be consistent with the national development plans. Also, if a country says no in the governing bodies of the CFC that this project should not be financed, then the project will not be financed. We understand that in many countries, it is difficult and costly to ask project proponents to get a letter of support from their government. So we're not asking for this explicit letter of support. If you have it, please provide it, it will help. A non-member question, whether a project can be in a non-member country, is complicated and simple at the same time. We're acting in the interest of beneficiaries in our member country. So if a company from the United States of America wants to run an operation in Kenya or in Uganda, they're most welcome to do so, but will only finance the activities in our member country. Then there's a question, how do we handle a new project proposed by the company in a new subsidiary company? Do we need to give a consolidated financial projections or only the new company projections? I think I need to defer this to Axel, but my instinctive reply would be consolidated, but it's not always possible because it can be a part of a much larger company.
No, I think the assessment is twofold. If the mother company is financially sound, takes the loan, it would be fine. We nevertheless needs to understand the operation it wants to fund. So yeah, it would at this time the practice has been different. We've received two different balance sheets of or a balance sheet of this mother company and the financial plan of the local operation. In general, because it's two things, yeah, it's on one side, it's the financial side, as said, which we need to assess, and if the mother company has sufficient financial resources, it's definitely positive. On the other side, we need to look at the impact of the operation to be newly funded, and there we need to understand the case, what is happening there. In many cases, and I was referring to that example, there is an operation being set up in one country, and there is an intention to set it up in the neighboring country. We want to understand the new operation, but we don't put up undue restrictions to that. So consolidated in a case when this company is still young may even generate difficulties. We rarely get really good consolidated balance sheets in such cases, I may say. Just the opposite. So we are trying to get around this, because consolidation is, yeah. And most of the time there are other participants, there are additional equity holders, and then the consolidation anyhow is difficult. At what methods do you consolidate two countries with different shareholders, pro rata and all of this? So yeah, but it's not complicated. If the mother company is financially sound and has shown a good operation, we find a way to go forward with that.
Okay, so then there's a related question also regarding startup launching with a good prospects and a guaranteed offtake by the conglomerate. So this is a particular business organization that I'm sure Axel would be willing to comment about. Before that, there's a question regarding manual for preparation of project proposals. And we used to have such manual, but it quickly becomes too thick and too inaccessible. So I would recommend to use the instructions for completing the application form that are made for accessibility, that are made for ease of use in specifically completing the application form. We're not trying to get a consultant level professional project preparation. We just want specific answers to the simplest possible questions that we can ask regarding the projects. So Axel.
Yes, I may add to this. This is a level of perfection which you are asking questions on, which is not our experience. So the projects that are typically not approved for further, they are not approved due to the fact that some minor principles of filling in the application sheet have not been met. We are pretty accommodating in that respect. The other example is, yeah, that was a startup, and there is again a protecting company that is financially sound. Same story. If there is in case of a guarantee, we always have to look into the financial capacities of the one who gives the guarantee. And on top of that, we have to look into the operation. Is this an operation that is within the missions of the CFC? If the operation is within the missions, if the impact that is going to be achieved is reasonable, and if the financial status of the one who gives the guarantee is fine, it is okay. And even in such a case, if I take Andre's example, if a US operation wants to put up a new operation in an African country, which has impact on spot, yeah, and this US operation would give a guarantee, it would be possible as well. Yeah, there are examples for that. Yeah, but let's not take US, let's take Switzerland. It's much easier, yeah, because Switzerland is a non-member, but we have some operational countries operational in Switzerland who have then given a guarantee to an operation in Africa or somewhere in Latin America to support this going forward for the sake of having local impact in this country. Then it's fully in line with the mission of the CFC.
Okay, there's the continuation of the previous question. So a company is ready to process, but has no raw materials and needs funds to cultivate the needed produce. And this is challenging for a company to start a new operation. Axel can.
Yeah, I have not a not so joyful example in that respect, because on one side I wonder how that comes. Yeah, because this is a little bit an issue. If you put up a company and put up the operation, and somebody has funded it, and all of a sudden you find out that there is no working capital, I rather have my doubts in the strength of the management of this company. We've seen these examples as well. There is a famous operation, and it has been a famous operation in South Africa of a tomato concentrate company that has been built up. And all of a sudden, when they started operating, they found out they have no farmer network to generate the tomatoes. Yeah, this is the question I would come up with. If there is a company, we have another example. This company has and I put the example as I have it from our own past. This company had a deposit with the bank to fund its working capital, and all of a sudden this bank went bankrupt, and the money was gone, and so they could not fund the operation. This is an operation where we jumped in, because the company was sound, and they were hit by an event that they could not foresee. Yeah, because their money, their liquid money, which they needed to fund the operation, was gone somehow. And all within all these examples, so we have to have a look at it. Why is this the case? But having an operation somewhere that all of a sudden has not doesn't have the working capital to go on processing raises some questions, but not fundamentally the question not to be funded. The answer to the question may be interesting.
Yeah, so it is difficult to answer those
in
questions.
In general, yeah.
Because they're always specific. They're always specific to the case.
So here, and that is the case, I don't want to discourage you. If that is such an operation and you have good reasons to present this case, please present it. Yeah, but in this general webinar, making statements about a single company without knowing all the details may become a little bit cumbersome, and you may nail me down on statements later, which and I only have a part of the information that is required. Yeah?
Yeah.
So the question is, why is this the case in such a case? How comes? And this should be answered by the application then, that this situation is all of a sudden there. And if other finances are dropping out, the assumption is, oh, why are they dropping out? Why isn't this money available? Yeah. And these are the reasons we need to understand. And there are good and bad ones.
Right. There's a few mentionings of IDH, IFDC, and 2Scale. I think we have been in contact with all three organizations on different occasions. Quite appreciate the experience of working with them. And joint proposals, certainly most welcome.
Yes, indeed. CFC is not a, yeah, I'm happy to say this. We are not a standalone operation. When we started the business we are doing right now, since 2012 going forward, where we concentrated on loans and on financial interventions that require some repayment, since that time we developed all different kind of corporations. We are looking into partnerships with others. IDH is one of them. We have not. I cannot say that we have a highly developed partnerships, but in single cases and single projects, we have been cooperating, and that's an advantage definitely, because IDH to some extent is covering some risk aspects of project which make it possible for others to jump in with financing. And that is more or less the concept. So that is one of these institutions that can be really helpful in some cases. I just call the term blended finance, which has become so popular and which is a very widespread word, but it appears in many different forms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's a question asking to share a copy of the presentation, and we will do that to all people with registered email addresses who take part in this event. So that will be done. Then there's a question on a cost revision. So a project where cost will have to be revised after approval. Can projects be modified after approval by the CFC?
So that means the historic cost. So the projections will have to be changed due to some events which have occurred. I very much appreciate any project to present new projections if something has changed. So this is more on the positive side. If if the assumptions did not, have undergone some change because things have changed, and what we can see most of the times, pricing has changed, the availability of certain input has changed, or something like that, or equipment has been a lot more expensive than thought, or something like that. Once a project is approved, we are requiring an only annually for the time being, because we don't want to overcharge the project. We are always asking for some progress reports where things like this, and even a revision of the plan going forward, is very much appreciated and is expected. Yeah. So please provide this.
Yeah. Right, and we do understand that for example, in the pandemic, a number of projects faced delays in the operational cycle, needing more liquidity and needing the emergency liquidity facility that was mentioned. But also we have a certain flexibility from our executive board for those specific cases where project experience a force majeure to adjust the terms of the project within reason to accommodate this. So I see, if I forgot any of the questions, then please just open your microphone and go ahead to ask, because I don't see anything in the chat. I'm asking my colleagues from the Secretariat to make a note of all the email addresses in the chat box to circulate a copy of the presentation today. Well, I'm sure not all the questions have been answered. I'm sure that there will be more questions that may come to your mind later. Again, please do not hesitate to email us at opencall@commonfund.org. This is a mailbox that is carefully monitored, and we will provide answers there to all the questions that may come up. Yes, so a question, will we be sending the presentation to all? We will send the presentation to all for whom we have email address in the registration, and the email addresses that we got now in the chat box as well. Okay, so I believe we have nothing further to say. So again, the floor is open, the microphone is open for any questions. We can stay online for a few minutes if somebody wants to think, reflect a bit on this. So if there's no questions, then it's okay to leave the meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for coming today. It's a pleasure to have such good attendance. I'm really encouraged by that.